Hello everybody, Tech with Sean here. Today we're going to be talking about Microsoft examinations and some tips that will help you prepare to take your upcoming exams. Whether it's Azure, Microsoft 365, Windows, and whatever else, these are general tips that I hope will help you out. I just want to start by saying that it's extremely important for you to be thoroughly prepared for these exams and not to take them lightly, then hope you'll end up with a passing mark. For one, the passing mark is really high. You need to get at least 700 out of 1,000 points, so 70% or higher. And second, even if you were very experienced in the field, you still have a very good chance of failing the exam because of the way the questions are posed. Don't get me wrong, having practical experience is probably the biggest advantage that you'll have, but the questions can often be intentionally tricky and sometimes dives into very minute and specific details that you may not be used to even thinking about or encountering in the workplace. With that being said, let's get into the tips. Tip number one, understand structures. Now, if you haven't done any Microsoft examinations previously, I highly recommend that you get acquainted with the way the questions are presented or structured. There are over 10 different ways and I'll put them up on the screen right now. I'll also put a link in the description for you to go and check out each of those and watch a short clip of how they'll work. It'll take you 5 or maximum 10 minutes to go through all of them and understand. Very important to do so that you're not confused during the examination and lose out on some easy marks. The tip number 2 is to link documentations and outline. The exam skills outline can be found on Microsoft Learn under the appropriate certification. This outline will essentially provide you with the syllabus of what you'll encounter in the examination, along with how much each section weighs. So you can use this outline very effectively in multiple ways, like prioritizing which sections you want to focus on because of the amount of weight that it carries, or maybe you find that some topics are difficult that may take some more time, whereas the others you already are pretty proficient with and you can prioritize accordingly to that. Another way to use this outline, and this is the first thing that I do when I decide to prepare for the examination, is I search for the Microsoft documentation links that can be associated with that specific topic, and then I skim through the documentation to make sure that it has the content, and then I note the link down. For example, if I was to prepare for Plan for Apps, then for these 3 bullet points, I'd find the documentations relevant specifically for these topics and hyperlink it either on Microsoft Word or my digital note-taking application. This helps me stay organized when I'm actually studying, as I can maintain my focus on studying itself rather than constantly switching out to find relevant materials. And it also helps me manage my time because from skimming through the documentations, I know how much content I need to study, and that gives me an idea on how many subsections I can finish in a day. Speaking of collecting links to help you study, it doesn't always have to be Microsoft documentations. One of my favorite search hacks on Google is to use quotation marks to find exactly what I'm looking for. For example, plan and implement device authentication methods like Windows Hello. I just copy this and put it within quotation marks. This will return results of web pages containing the specific words that we pasted in. So if any blogs containing teaching material for that section were to be online, I could easily find it. I could also find paid training resources, the documentations, and full study guides on helpful links. So that's a small tip that often comes very handy for me. In the beginning, I mentioned that having practical experience is probably the biggest advantage that you have, and I stand by that. When I prepare for a Microsoft 365 examination, I make sure that regardless of whatever reading materials I have, I also get enough hands-on experience. So in my case, I signed up for the Microsoft 365 developer program, which gives you a tenant in which you can test out different things. And apart from how much reading and writing down helped me, the practice also cemented the knowledge into my mind, because now I could picture doing something like setting a policy, how I went about doing it and how exactly it affected my tenant, the admins, the users, etc. This is especially helpful if you get a lab question on your examination, which will have you to actually do the task on the virtual session that is provided to you. You don't have to look for the practical resources yourself. Earlier on, when I was working for an MSP, they provided me with a tenant to study for these exams as well. So if your organization is requesting for you to take these certifications, then I definitely recommend that you request a tenant or whatever subscription and resources you need in order to get practical experience on the topic that you're studying for. Tip number 5 is to practice questions, not brain dumps. There are 2 types of dumps, practice dumps and brain dumps. Practice dumps are questions that are relevant to the syllabus but aren't questions that have appeared before in previous examinations, whereas brain dumps are copy-pasted questions from actual past examinations. Brain dumps are illegal, and Microsoft repeatedly says that anyone caught having used brain dumps will eventually be revoked of their certifications as well as be banned from future examinations. Practice dumps, on the other hand, can be purchased from various websites like MeasureUp, with which you can do official Microsoft practice questions, kind of evaluate yourself. Now, these can tend to be expensive, and if your organization is not willing to pay for these, then it might be an issue. But doing these practice tests can be a legitimate method of really coming to understand how prepared you actually are. The questions are most probably not going to be repeated in your examinations. A lot of people don't seem to understand this, and then they use these practice dumps multiple times and memorize them as if they were brain dumps, and then end up getting a failing grade. So definitely be very smart in how you use this. The last thing you want to do is pay for practice tests as well as your exam and then fail. Alright, let's look at some of the other resources that you can use to prepare. There is usually a section on Microsoft Learn under the module you're attempting, which will let you choose between the online free training or the instructor-led training. I think that if you're a complete beginner to the module, the online free training can be useful, but it definitely does not have enough information for you to attempt the exam with. So go through that, but don't use it as your only resource. Now, the instructor-led training can depend on which learning partner you choose. If they're known to be competent, then go for it. It could be very expensive, so just keep that in mind. Obviously, since we are in COVID times, having face-to-face training isn't exactly ideal, so there's still a lot of online training. I would suggest if you do have the ability to study for yourself, then go for the video trainings provided in Udemy, Pluralsight, or other reputed learning channels. Definitely check the reviews before you pay for the module, and always check the date in which the module training was posted, because the MS exams can tend to be updated very often, and so does the Microsoft products and features. So there's definitely bound to be some outdated content out there. Other than those, there's a very high chance that there's a book on the specific module you're studying for. Just Google the module and you should probably find the title for it. This will be helpful in case you're not only purchasing it to pass your exams, but as a general guidebook that you may use in your career in the future. We talked a little about note-taking in tip number 2. It's one of the most important aspects for me when it comes to preparation. Whether you're using note-taking applications or you're more comfortable with handwritten note-taking, just note-taking itself helps a ton. I prefer digital note-taking because of the links and hyperlinks and just the ability to easily organize everything. For example, I use Microsoft OneNote, which is completely free, and I create notebooks according to modules. I break the main sections in the exam outlines to be sections in my notebook, and I use these subsections as pages, then add the topics as subpages. Very simple, and if I find any topics that connect to each other, all I have to do is hyperlink it within the notebook instead of actually having to search for it. I also separate sections for resources like links and blogs, etc. For me, motivation is a huge factor in studying, and my notes and just the way that I organize it plays a huge role in just feeling comfortable coming back to it, especially when revising, because it saves you a ton of time and effort in finding what you're searching for. Finally, let's talk a little about the Microsoft exams. Generally, a Microsoft exam has between 40 to 60 questions, and depending on the type of exam you take, you'll be given anywhere between 45 minutes to over 2 hours. So find out how many questions your exam generally has, find the time that you'll be allocated, and as I said in tip number 1, understand the structure of the questions you may get and prepare accordingly. You can take the exam online, which is great, especially these days, but just make sure you have a working webcam, a microphone, and a surrounding in which there isn't too much noise. You are monitored pretty heavily. You're asked to take pictures of your surroundings before starting, and once you've started, you're essentially being watched the entire time. So, don't even consider cheating, because if you are caught, you will fail the exam and most probably be banned from taking future exams. It's just not worth the risk. A few other things. You don't lose marks for wrong answers, so in case you don't know the answer, don't leave it blank, just put down your best guess. If you have the time, double check the answers. There are questions you cannot return back to, like the repeated answer choice questions, so be aware of those and answer them carefully. You will be given a pass or fail soon after you finish, but the certification and award may take some time to appear in your dashboard. And finally, just keep in mind to take it easy. If you did fail for some reason or the other, don't let it get to you. Just make sure to have a good amount of prep time, follow the tips that I've laid out, and study hard. And if any of the tips did help you out in your exams, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Good luck, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.